we have four types of imperfect competition to consider. The first one is monopolistic competition. Monopolistic competition is similar to pure competition in the sense that there are many suppliers and the barriers to entry are very low. However, the suppliers try to achieve some price advantage by differentiating their products from other similar products. Most consumer goods, such as health and beauty aids, fall into this category. In monopolistic competition, suppliers try to differentiate their products as being better so that they can justify higher prices or to increase market share. Monopolistic competition is only possible, however, when the differentiation is significant, or if the suppliers are able to convince consumers that the differences are significant, and by advertising or using advertising or other methods that would convince consumers of product superiority. Example of monopolistic competition would be hairdressing. There are many firms or many organizations which do hairdressing. They offer a slightly different service. However, there is not a significant difference in what it is that they offer. As such, it is the ability of the different organizations, the different hairdressers, to be able to convince their consumers that their product is significantly different, which is done through personalizing the service or advertising and promoting their products to highlight or showcase the differences between, say, hairdresser A and hairdresser B. If you think about the beauty and cosmetics industry, they also fall into a monopolistic competition category, considering their particular market has a lot of different organizations pretty much selling the same thing. So it becomes the skills of the marketing department to really highlight and showcase why they're different. In today's world, a lot of social media influencers are being used, but it's basically the same game, just being played differently. The second type of imperfect competition is an oligopoly. Oligopoly is a market dominated by a few suppliers. Oversupply and demand influences all markets. Price and output by an oligopoly are also based on strategic decisions. For example, a business could choose to change the price or how much they produce, but they would have to consider to themselves what would be the response of other members of the oligopoly to a change in price or output by one member. Oligopolies do have a high barrier to entry, which limits the number of suppliers that can compete in the market. So the oligopolistic firms have considerable influence over the market price. However, they must always consider the actions of the firms in the market when changing prices, because they are certain to respond in a way to neutralize any changes so that they can maintain their market share. Basically meaning, if I try to change something with my product, chances are my competition will do the same, and therefore the advantage that I was going to have, I'm no longer get. So all the time, money, and effort put into making those changes basically become redundant. There are a few examples of oligopolies, in particular the manufacturing of automobiles. You can say that the auto industry is a good example of oligopoly because the fixed cost of automobile manufacturing is very, very high, thus limiting the number of firms that can enter the market in the first place. Another example of this, probably even more obvious, would be the oil industry. There's only a handful of countries around the world that produce oil and hence have banded together to create an organization called OPEC. OPEC stands for the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries. It is an intergovernmental organization of 13 countries founded on 14 September 1960. OPEC's mission statement is to coordinate and unify the petroleum policy of its member countries and ensure the stabilization of oil markets in order to secure an efficient, economic, and regular supply of petroleum to consumers. In simple words, control production, control price, and ensure a consistent supply, hence an oligopoly. The third example is pure monopoly. In pure monopoly, the pricing power lies within the market itself. There's only one supplier who has significant market power and determines the price of its product. A pure monopoly faces little competition because of high barriers to entry, such as high initial cost. or because the company has acquired significant market influence through network effects. A good example of this would be, say, Facebook, for instance. If you think about when Facebook first started, there were multiple platforms online that quite essentially did what Facebook did. However, over time, Facebook did it so much better and outlasted its competition, therefore having a perfect or pure monopoly. Another example would be Microsoft. When it comes to operating system, majority of the world's PC market, laptop market runs on Microsoft. The only real comparison, or the only real competitor, would be Apple, and for those a bit more tech-savvy, Linux. In terms of Microsoft, because many computer users have standardized software that are compatible with Microsoft Windows operating system, most of the market is effectively locked in. Because the cost of using different operating systems, both in terms of acquiring new softwares that will be compatible with a new operating system, as well as the learning curve required to use a different operating system and how the software feels or looks or can be interacted with, it's a pretty steep learning curve, which is why people are willing to pay Microsoft high prices for Windows. The last type of imperfect competition that we're going to look at today, or imperfect market, is a duopoly. Duopoly is a type of oligopoly where two firms have dominant or exclusive control over the market. It is very similar to an oligopoly, with the major difference being rather than having a handful of suppliers, in a duopoly, you quite essentially just have two. Duopolies sell to consumers in a competitive market where the choice of the individual consumers cannot affect the firm. For example, a smartphone market is a duopoly with Apple on one side and Android dominating the sector being in the other. So let's say you are a mobile phone manufacturer and you want to get your product out there. Now you're really good at making the phone, choosing the right camera, having a fantastic screen, creating everything that you need for a phone, but you still need software to make it run. From a software perspective, unless your company is called Apple, you basically have to go with Android. Of course, you can look at creating your own software, but that's very time-consuming and very expensive. And at the same time, the market, as in all the customers that are potentially out there and all the competition that's currently out there, they're used to the current way of doing things. So for anyone to choose you and your product and to use your new operating system requires a very steep learning curve that a lot of people just aren't willing to commit to. So, duopoly. The Australian market is also filled with many examples of duopoly. In recent years, competition has increased with international organizations moving into the Australian market as well. But for example, telecommunications industry in Australia was a duopoly, Telstra being one of the main players, and the other one being Optus. Groceries, once again, was a duopoly. You've got Woolworths on one side, Coles on the other. And once again, these industries have a very, very high initial investment cost. So it's difficult for competitors to enter this market. In saying that, when the international market opens up and there are strong players internationally, as in globally, they move into the markets and can make a duopoly market into more of a monopolistic competition, thereby offering greater choice to their customers. To conclude with, is imperfect competition bad? Well, in real life, pure competition or perfect competition, it doesn't really exist. In theory, it looks fantastic, but without very, 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 very heavy regulations, it's impossible to make it happen. But then as soon as you start regulating it, it's no longer a perfect competition anyway. As such, imperfect competition is the norm as opposed to being the exception. And provided there is some oversight, barriers to entry reduces, and people's imagination in doing things better never fades, we will always be in a situation where we will strive to make tomorrow better than today. And better means a lot of different things. More choice, greater sustainability, more financially sustainable products for consumers, economic activity resulting in jobs for everyone. Well, everyone that wants a job, that is. So I guess perfect competition is more of an aspirational hope that we could maybe achieve someday, or at least not give up on. and try to strive towards.